Welcome, everybody, to another installment of our look at Monarch Legacy of Monsters on Apple TV Plus. We just watched episode 6. I'm here. I'm at Brad Jost. At Brad Jost? That's just a handle. My name is just Brad Jost. And this is Tom. What's going on, Tom? Tom Jurassic, and not Agent
good,
T.
yeah.
No Agent T today, I guess.
I'm just gonna... Oh. It's telling me this is going to be a really cool podcast. Well, it's not
There's
a podcast, it's a video, but...
No Doctor Who references in today's episode, I don't believe, but we did a good episode. I was very excited by this one. What do you think? Just general thoughts.
Yeah, overall, it was a really, really solid episode. It moves the story forward quite a bit. It gives us a lot more context about how Monarch is kind of falling apart in the past, and how that's had an impact on where we are currently.
Yeah, that was a great summary. I don't want to, step on your toes there. That was perfect. And I think this episode, the way it starts off, really lays the groundwork for like what the episode's about to be. I feel like this episode, I hit play and it goes straight to the intro, right? And I'm like, oh, stuff's about to go down. Like, this is going to be a big episode. Because I feel like when you change the path of what the usual episodes are, where you have like the cold open or the intro sequence or whatever, then you get to the the title screen with the intro, and I'm like, no, they're not doing any of that. They're not wasting any time telling you like some lead up story. It's just we're in it. And I thought that was pretty cool. So we cut right to the trailer, or not to the trailer, whatever you call it, the intro video at that point. But we start off at the 1955 Summer Ball in Washington, D.C. And it was like, setting the tone. I like the 1955 story, setting. I think that's pretty good. We've progressed a little bit as time's gone on, and we get Shaw and Keiko are at this ball together, and they're, they have to try to, leverage their sway a little bit with the higher ups, and but at the same time, they're kind of falling for each other here. It's kind of interesting to see because in my mind, as I'm watching, this series, I'm thinking about Bill and Keiko, and I'm not thinking about anything else. I'm not even considering Shaw as a player in her storyline.
He is a player.
yeah, definitely. So I just thought it was like kind of out of left field and caught me off guard and took my mind down places where I'm like, oh my God, wait a minute. Is this whole story like that I've thought was true a lie now? Like what is going on here? So, they basically comfort each other, or Shaw mostly comforts Keiko around the fact that like people are making comments about her, being Japanese descent and stuff. And, she's one of the good ones. And, Shaw's reinforcing that like she's here to change their old ways and like, be a force of nature for what they're trying to do. I thought it was a really great sequence that led to some very like sweet moments between the two of them.
Yeah, and I think for the historical context, it's really interesting that the dance here is specifically the American defense industry, because obviously we know that whenever there's war or conflict, the defense industry tends to do quite well out of that. So it's quite interesting seeing the sort of highlight of all of these sort of top wigs from that industry in this room at a time when we know they've just used a nuclear weapon to try and stop Godzilla, and you kind of sort of get the basis of, this potentially being the sort of new conflict that all of these people are embroiled in a way, which was quite cool. And I think the thing I liked as well, and they've done this a couple of times, is I like the fact that they're not shying away from the tensions between America and Japan post World War II as well. I think it's really cool to actually see them acknowledging that historical context and how some people have moved forward from that, and some people, the military, traditionally speaking, tend to be a little bit antiquated in some of their approaches. And it's quite interesting seeing how that plays out here as well, I think.
Yeah, and I love that it sets the tone for the world building, and it gives you a clear picture at where the military's at, where they're at, And I love that it just brought them two together and in a way that I
Yeah.
just didn't expect. And they had a nice sweet dance together that was very cool. Everybody's staring at them. Um, Later on, they move around the corner somewhere, and Keiko's like, favorite thing about kids is that they never say I don't know or whatever. And I was like,
Yeah.
hey, that's a lie. Like she's talking she's talking about like how like kids are, they have to tackle new stuff every day, and like they just and I'm like, my kids are like constantly being like, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to do that. And I'm like, guys, you gotta figure it out. You gotta figure it out. So Keiko's lying straight up here. But there's a nice comment after that by Shaw. I don't know, it's his favorite thing is making them. So it's a whole
Yeah.
there's a whole vibe going on right here that is interrupted by Bill with his like telegram or whatever he's sending out, his message out there. He's interrupting the whole vibe, ruining
It's
things.
my favorite thing ever because this entire time Bill's been like, "Oh yeah, I don't really care. You guys have got a thing going," and then when they're finally about to have a thing going, quite literally, he just gets in the middle of it.
Yeah. So during this whole sequence, like I said, my mind was like racing through scenarios, and I think it was like when they were dancing. There's not much happening except for them dancing, just the music. Maybe they make a few comments here and there, but my mind was like envisioning their whole future together and what happens to get to where we are in the current timeline. And
Yeah,
I was like, whoa, I had a flashback like before my own life. And it was like, I just witnessed their whole, storyline. I'm like, wow, that's interesting that like, oh, so are these kids that he's helping in the future his grandkids? And, Bill was just the guy who stepped up and took care of them. And,
yeah,
they all took his name. And I'm like, oh my God, like I didn't even think about this as a possibility. I know we talked about stuff like like why is he so eager to help? Like what is his role in all of this? And that could obviously be a big part of that.
yeah. I think it's just a whole interesting dynamic. I get the sense that events later in the episode sort of put Bill and Keiko back on the trajectory of kind of being the parents we thought they were going to be. Um, but I still think there's a lot of unanswered questions because by the time you meet Randa in Kong Skull Island, Keiko isn't around and Shaw's not around. So clearly there's more that's going to play out here, and I'm quite interested to see how that plays out, what that kind of dynamic looks like. And actually, potentially, if we do any more jumps forward in terms of the timeline to sort of explain what that looks like as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I really want to learn more, and I'm sure we are. Like they're doing such a great job of uncovering the storyline like little by little. We
Yes.
didn't really get much of this storyline for the past 2 episodes, I believe, or so. So it's kind of nice to really dive back into the past and see what's going on there and learn about the start of Monarch, like continue that process.
Yeah.
But we do cut to current day, and we're in Alaska, and Shaw is
Yeah.
in this transport truck with a bunch of Monarch lackeys, basically, and Duval comes and like takes him out, karate chops him
You
out of the
called
truck.
it.
I just had a feeling. I thought things maybe flipped at the end of the last episode when
Yeah.
she was taking that phone call from May, but yeah, something he said got through to her, and it was very clear
Mhm.
in this episode that like she joined Monarch out of necessity because like her sister, yeah, I think guess she there wasn't a lot of the story told right there, but basically,
Yeah.
got the idea that oh, her sister died via some sort of monster attack, and she wanted to make sure that that never happened again. She
Yeah.
joined Monarch saying never again, and she meant it. That was like purposeful, and that's why he
Yeah.
joined and stuff like that. And she wants to see that phrasing matter, in the future of
Yes.
Monarch. So I thought that was really great to kind of get that insight and learn like, oh, we were on the right path with what we were saying.
Brad, this scene is even more significant than you realize. I'll hit you with the big connection in a second. But the first thing I find really interesting is the fact that when they're talking, there's the sentence about Shaw. So Shaw says that Monarch have known everything for years, but they don't believe it. And I find that really curious because he then says anyone who disagrees is crazy. And so I just rewatched King of the Monsters this weekend, and in that Brooks appears, the Doctor from Kong Skull Island as well. He appears as a much older man, and he's where they find Mothra. And it's interesting because one of the other characters references Dr. Brooks's theory around the Hollow Earth. But then obviously we haven't seen characters like Serazara, characters like Graham ever reference that. So it's almost as if Brooks fits into that category as well, of this character that's sort of been pushed to the fringes of Monarch almost. And that's something you get a sense for throughout this episode, is that actually there's a lot more fringe players in Monarch than you first realise. But, Brad, the piece of connected tissue that is going to blow your mind is that Duvall's sister worked at Janjira. So she worked at the nuclear power plant that Bryan Cranston's character worked at, where the Mutos first incubate.
Oh, I think
Duvall's sisters.
are you going to say this? Are you going to say what I think you're going to say?
Duvall's sister's name is Sandra, and his wife in the Godzilla 2014 film is Sandra. So we've seen Duvall's sister die.
Oh my god!
In Godzilla
Are you serious?
2014.
You're not. This is like legit research. Like that is.
Yes.
That's amazing stuff. You set it up for me before, even before we started recording. You're like, dude, I got something that'll blow your mind, and I'm just like,
yeah,
no, you don't. Like, which I know you do your research and all, but like at the same time, I'm just like, my mind doesn't really get that blown. All right,
yeah.
So that's incredible. Like that is such a in my mind, I figured I didn't do the research, but I figured, oh, it's probably that same facility that you mentioned.
Yeah.
And I'm like, something went bad, her sister died or whatever. But you just saying that like makes so much sense. And man, is that wild. And it connects this entire familial story like in such a really cool way. Like that's incredible. I love the storytelling here. Like this is so great. This is great, man. I love this show.
I scribbled down her
whole thing.
So I was rewatching it my second watch through when I was googling what Janjira was, and I was literally reading the Brody names, and it said his wife Sandra Brody, just as she went my sister Sandra, and I was literally like, what?
Wow, dude, that's incredible. Not a hard find, but like incredible that like that's what they are piecing together. And these people, like I said about this story in the beginning, where potentially Shaw is their true grandfather or something like that. Like it's laying these stories that we don't even realize are a thing until they reveal like one piece of information. It's like really cool to see that. Like we had no clue that this woman Duvall was tied to anything from 2014's Godzilla. But hey, it is. That's awesome. That's fantastic.
There's also, I'll talk about this later, but I think there's another really interesting connection to the 2014 Godzilla in this, in terms of the end of this episode, which I'll talk about when we get there.
What I love about you and what you're on right now, this whole kick, is that I feel like you are like truly Agent T involved in this universe in a way where like you've got a conspiracy theory here that this show is going to be tied to the Hollow Earth in some major way. And if it's not tied to that, like, oh my God, it's gonna be earth shattering. So I love that you are sticking to your guns, dude, and you are really selling this as being like a Hollow Earth story. And it works. In my mind, you're right. Like it's gotta be some sort of connective tissue to what we see in other movies and stuff. And there is this gap that we've talked about so often that like, we go from kind of a really grounded world 2014 to King of the Monsters, just things are just taken to another level, like in terms of what Monarch is and everything. So I love that. I love that conspiracy hole that you've gone down, literally speaking, and then into the Hollow Earth. Let's continue on, because we go back to 1955. 1955, and where are we? So they are discussing like a reading that's gone off the scale. Shaw is back in
Yeah,
the headquarters, the Monarch headquarters. Um, and it's something that like they haven't seen this since like the Philippines, I think it was mentioned. Um, and this is very reminiscent of a scene that we got like a few episodes ago when they said the same exact thing about like G Day. And it's like, we haven't seen this
yeah,
since G Day. So I feel like there's a lot of mirroring going on in this episode as far as like things that we've already heard. And I think it's really cool to see how it's, this is basically the storyline of Jurassic Park and why everybody says like, why they keep making another park and why do they keep going to Dinosaur Islands is because nobody
yeah.
ever learns from the mistakes of the people before them. And that's what this show is also doing. And I love that approach. I think that's really cool. So, they found another signal and it's out in Japan. Sean needs to stay back and kind of, work with the military on getting that funding like really secured, I guess. And he's apprehensive about it. And to me, in my mind, like, it seems like a very selfish reason.
Yes.
He just almost had his moment with Keiko and like now he's not going to get it, so he has to be there with her. So it's very like controlling. Um
Yeah.
but I don't there's not a very altruistic meaning behind him wanting to go with them. I feel like he keeps saying like they need me and I
Yeah.
need to protect them, but like I don't that's not really the reason. So it's interesting
Well,
to see what he's doing.
it's all laid out quite bare to you in the sentence that he says to Duvall in the scene before, isn't it? Where he says, "I didn't do enough where I could have," or something to that extent.
Yeah.
So I'm doing it now. So you're kind of seeing that he still, so many years later, feels guilt for the fact that he's made a decision that's motivated more by his emotional investment in Keiko than it is motivated by the greater good of Monarch. And that, I mean, we'll talk about this more, but that decision has a massive ripple effect. Like it's when
Yeah.
when you think about it in the context of where we are in this universe, that's a huge impact that he's had that's still being felt in the universe that we're seeing the characters exploring in the modern day.
Yeah. So we do make ourselves back to the future again, and making Back to the Future references all the time here. Um,
Marty?
yeah, yeah. Hey, Doc, we gotta get back to Kate's mom's house. And we are there at Kate's mom's house, and Shaw and Duval are there. And Duval's not taking
It's not
Monarch's
Duvall
orders.
anymore, it's Michelle.
Oh, is that what she was called at that
Yeah,
point?
he
Okay,
says her
all right.
first name's Michelle.
All right, cool. There's a lot of like last name usage here, and I always find that funny, like when people just strictly go by like last names. So
Yeah.
Michelle is there, and Michelle is not taking Monarch's orders anymore, and they basically need the kids' help. So they're it's another team up. They're trying to do it, but the kids are like, I don't know. I don't know if we should trust
Yeah.
this, but at that same time, over in San Francisco, just a little while over, I guess, in Kate's dad's office, they're basically like, or Tim is there with Verdugo, and they're like, what did they come here for? Like, what were they looking
Yeah.
for? And they basically, Tim finds the holes in the wall and conveniently draws the nice map on the wall, and he's like, okay, look, everything is in this exact position. So I thought that was pretty good. He's like, does it, which I found was funny. He's feeling the holes in the wall. He's like, doesn't this look familiar to you? I'm like, what? Does it?
Yeah,
How?
Verdugo's like, "What?"
Yeah, what are you going on about, Tim? So I thought that was funny, but they basically showcase that, and then they also mention talk about Hiroshi and like why was he removed from
Yes.
from Monarch, and basically because of like the misuse of assets, using satellites, not pointing them towards the sky and towards space, but pointing them towards Earth, and seeing the gamma radiation and stuff like that on the spectrum of
Yeah.
Earth, like what's happening down below. So that was a misuse
Yeah.
of all their stuff. So
He is, Hiroshi is, and I know you're going to laugh because after you saying it earlier, I'm now talking about it, but he is mapping out the Hollow Earth because I know I messaged you when I watched King of the Monsters and I forgot that they actually go into the Hollow Earth underwater in the submarine, but there's all the radiation there because that's what ultimately kills Serizawa. So there is gamma radiation in the hollow earth. It's a known fact.
Mm,
And this person's trying to map all of these pockets of gamma radiation. So it's
yeah.
quite interesting. But also, here you still get a sense that Verdugo's a little bit shady, because did you notice that at first she denies that he was expelled? And then it's only when
Hmm.
Tim's like, are you going to say anything else? That she
Yeah.
then actually explains that he was because of misappropriating technology. So it's
Yeah.
clear that, to me at least, that Verdugo is a character who's very used to covering things up. And I think she's intrinsic to a lot of what has happened to Monarch in the years since Shaw's made the decision that we'll come to.
Thinking about it now, they made their circles. Tim was circling like a bunch of different places. And then like towards the end of that whole sequence, he circles one in like the middle of the ocean. Do you think
Yeah.
that I don't know where that, Godzilla fortress was located underneath the ocean, but
Oh,
like
Castle Bravo.
could that
Yeah.
be that location maybe? Like,
It
did he
certainly could
map that
be.
out? Yeah, that would be interesting if
I
it did
mean,
line
it
up.
could
I
be
have no
Castle
idea.
Bravo. Equally, I tell you what else is in the middle of the ocean: Skull Island.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I was wondering. Assumed it was an island, but just talking about that underground, cave, basically, I was like, maybe
Yeah,
could be there. All right, so back in the past, Keiko and Bill are talking with some dude who's got like a big science experiment going on. He's basically Doc Brown
yeah,
out there in Japan, and he's like, "Welcome to Monster Island," which I thought was great. Like hearing that, and basically he reveals that that big ball with all the things coming off of it is like a gamma radiation simulator. So it's basically like
yeah.
a signal to all the Titans out there to say like, "Hey, we're making our call. Like, you're gonna respond." So that was really cool. And
It
we,
was.
go ahead.
I'm gonna hit you with another connection here.
Okay.
I'm really glad I watched King of the Monsters when I do, because
Yeah,
I'm really curious now as to whether this technology is a precursor to what we eventually see with the Orca.
yeah, it's got to
It
be
just
right.
feels, yeah, because the Orca, when you watch it, it has that same pulsing effect as well with how it does the noise. So I
Mhm.
just feel like there's some kind of connection there between this and the Orca as well.
Yeah, you got to be right there. That I didn't even really think about that, but we progressively see that
Boom, 2
device.
for 2 this show.
We get it. We see that device getting smaller and smaller. It started off as this huge like mine that basically like you'd see in the ocean or something, and then it's like it's a bit smaller,
Yeah,
in current day, and then maybe in King of the Monsters it's just like a laptop sized thing, like So so yeah, but that would be cool if that was like the precursor to that. Um, and I like how it lines up later on in the episode a little bit. But we go back to not even very far, but go back to Africa, and May still wants to go home. He still wants to figure out, when she can get out of this situation. I didn't want to be here, but she'll get out of it as soon as they get out of the desert. It's all good, all clean. So there we find out there's other ex-monarch people out there who want kind of that same thing. They're
yes.
not all bad guys and stuff like that. So Kate was like reluctant to work with more monarch people.
Yeah,
Um, but at this point, Shaw's like, hey, if you don't want to work with these people, like, go, you can go. Like, I'll take it from here. You give me the stuff, I'll go, and then you guys can go home. But he basically says like, yeah, but a lot of people could die, and this could all be on your shoulders. This could all
yeah,
be your fault. And I thought, I'm just gonna keep talking because I thought that was just such a brilliant piece of like storytelling, because you get that moment in current timeline, and then the next scene is Shaw goes to a backyard cookout,
yeah.
which he kind of referenced that earlier in the episode. We get a kid with a dinosaur toy with a T-Rex dragging its tail and all, and I was like, that's a Godzilla precursor right there if I ever saw one. But he basically has the conversation with the general guy, Puckett or something. What's his name?
Yes, yeah,
Um,
yeah, Pocket.
so he has a conversation with him, and that guy is like, hey, if you don't do what if you don't do what you're supposed to be doing, a lot of things could go wrong. Like it's the same
Yeah,
exact situation, but like the guy's using the leverage in like a little bit different, in a more sinister way than like Shaw was using it. Shaw's like trying
yeah,
to use it as like leverage for like emotionally like speaking, like to get across to her that like we need you. But this guy's like, no, if you don't do that, like things are gonna be real bad for you, and we'll see that a little
Yeah.
bit in the towards the end of the episode. But I thought that was really cool to see like him use that same tactic as the general who used on him, basically. But
Yeah,
it didn't work.
you
It
could
didn't
tell that
work.
he's kind of learned that. I thought it was really interesting, the introduction to Scotty as well. And obviously, sadly, later in the episode, he becomes a pancake. But it was quite cool just getting this introduction of another character who's sort of defecting from Monarch. 'Cause I feel like what this story has really painted the picture of Monarch as an organization that's crumbling from the inside, because you get Shaw say that anyone who disagrees with them is described as crazy. So
Mhm.
that suggests that there's more than one person who has disagreed with them and has been faced similar treatment to what Shaw's had. You then have Hiroshi, who's obviously gone rogue to do his own thing because he felt they weren't doing enough to sort it themselves. You have now Scotty, this mercenary character who's gone rogue. Duvall, who's had enough and has said, you know what, they're not actually dealing with this quick enough. We need to take action into our own hands. It's really interesting because it paints this picture of the organization in a very different light, where you have Sarah Zara and Graham in the films who perhaps don't know everything. And I feel like throughout the films, you get a sense of, in both 2014 and The King of the Monsters, they're kind of learning as much as they can as they go. So you kind of see them learning and putting things together. And that feels like that's their characters sort of operating within the confines of Monarch and what they're essentially allowed to do. And in this series, you kind of have the polar opposite of it, which is actually these people saying, no, we want to solve this quicker. So we're going to go beyond what Monarch is doing to try and solve it. And I think that paints a really interesting dynamic, because ultimately, to kind of get back to what you're saying, what we're seeing unfold with Shaw and the other characters really does parallel the kind of attitudes that we see in the past story that's unfolding. And as we'll get to soon, that past story doesn't unfold well for them. So that makes me
Yeah.
curious as to the trajectory of this story.
Yeah, I was really questioning throughout, this episode, like even is Monarch's role, like what are they
Yeah,
what are they? Because, we do see them obviously, throughout this storyline in 2014 and now, and they're obviously researching Godzilla when that whole thing was happening, and like, but they also know everything, but they don't believe it. So I'm like, what is happening? And I guess, it kind of towards the end of the episode starts to become clear, but like,
yeah,
is this whole organization just like, I don't know, like a conspiracy organization that does all this work, but at the same time just doesn't act on what they find?
yeah.
Like it's interesting. It's a very interesting company that
Yeah,
organization, I guess.
I tell you what, the timing of this is really interesting as well, because I think it rivals a lot of the stuff that you're seeing go through Congress currently in relation to UFOs, and whether you believe in them or not or whatever. It's really interesting seeing how that is kind of getting watered down as it goes through, sort of at different levels of government. You're kind of getting that similar story here, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, yeah. So we go back to current day and we get this nice moment. The music starts rising and it feels good. And it felt too good. It felt way too good because we see Hiroshi's alive and we're like, yes, sweet moment.
Yeah,
But but they all start waving and they all start smiling and laughing too much because you're like, okay, cut the waving. Let's be done. Let's be done because this is not going to be a good moment. You're all like, hey, he's alive. My dad's alive. Oh my gosh. And
yeah,
then you you start to see that, oh, he's got that same tool, that monster collar
yeah,
thingy, and it's now shrunk down quite a bit. It's just like a beach ball size or something, and then you see him waving. Oh, I'm waving too, but no, it's just like a get out of here, go. What are you
yeah.
doing? This guy's wild. Like I don't know what he's up to, but it's all his fault. Everything.
Yes.
I feel like whatever happened after that is it's very interesting that he's out there calling for Godzilla, who's literally just trying to get a nap in. Like that's
Yeah.
it. Like
I found it really interesting when I was watching the second time as well. He Hiroshi looks very worn down. Like, he
Hmm.
looks absolutely shattered. So I'm really curious as to, like, what has his whole journey been since being in Alaska, and how has he
Yeah.
ended up in Africa?
I
Because
wonder if I
Monarch
wonder if we'll get
lost
that.
track of him in Alaska, right? I
Yeah.
think we have to, because they lost track of him in Alaska, and if he's been following the route that is mapped out, then he's been to what, 3, 4 other places before ending up in Africa?
Yeah, I don't know. I was trying to think of that as well because Tim at one point was like, "Where is he gonna go next?" And I was like, "Well, he's
Yeah.
gone here." And yeah, so yeah, he's on his third or fourth spot. So, but yeah, he does look ragged, and I would assume maybe like whatever the last episode is. I always forget how many episodes. Do you know how many episodes are supposed to be? 10 or 8 or
Yes,
something.
10.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I would assume maybe by like episode 10 or something, maybe we'll get like that little backstory to kind of show like his I just missed them. And dude, there was a point in this episode where when Kentaro is looking down into the valley and he sees something. And I was like, yo, he sees some pencil shavings from all the way out here. I was like, man, he's got good eyes. Let me see them binoculars. And he saw his dad alive. But we cut back to 1955. The monster caller thing is in the water, and you know, there was a conversation between who was it? It was the scientist guy, I think, whoever
Yeah.
he is, and somebody else. Keiko, maybe? Yeah.
Yeah.
And they were talking about, what is it like when you see a Titan? And I just loved this use because there was like a little pause, and in my mind, I'm like, yo, that's terrifying. Like when you
Yeah.
actually see it. And that's what she said. Like, it's terrifying. And I was like, oh my, like that's such a great, I just love the use of just saying it was terrifying and not like beautiful or like,
Yeah.
something
Incredible.
incredible. Like I just love terrifying is another one of those kinds of words, but I just love that it was like we're at this point in the story where like people are and should be terrified of what they
Yeah.
see. I thought that was really cool. And then they say that miracles should be terrifying. And I was like, wow, yeah, that was a great line.
Yes,
I
that
really
was a
love
really
that
cool
line.
line. Yeah.
But yeah, that was really cool. So then Shaw shows up, and this whole scene, I was just like,
Oh my
I don't
god.
feel good. I don't feel good. Cause like he's like, hey guys, I'm here. And they're all like, wait,
I
what are you
don't
doing?
like
What are you doing here?
how alright Billy is with things, because he says to the other scientist, he's like, "Hey, look, there's one thing worse than being a third wheel, and that's being a fourth." And I'm like, "So you're a third wheel to your own relationship? What?"
Well, it's not his relationship. There's a whole lot going on here, but we I just didn't like that feeling in my stomach when they're like, looking at each other like you shouldn't be here. You had stuff to do.
Yeah.
You were supposed to meet with them. He's like, yeah, I'll just blow off the meeting with the higher ups or whatever. Like, yeah, it's fine. But we do cut to current day, and Monarch arrives in a helicopter. We see that. So
Yeah.
and Tim's in
Timmy
there.
boy.
Timmy's in the helicopter. We're in this point in the story, we're kind of like cutting all over the place. We're going all over the place. So 1955 again, Keiko's angry that Shaw's there. But they do end up kissing anyway. The relationship's okay. Even though like he shouldn't have made that choice. And in that moment, I'm just like, yeah, this is like his choice leads them down the path of Monarch becoming what it is, and I thought this right now, not even later in the story. I'm like, yeah, this is it. Like this is the point in the story where like things change. We also do get the signal stopping in the water out there, and then boom, that big ball gets thrown across the water, almost hits them. And guess who pops out of the water? I was like genuinely like, oh, who's gonna be here? Like, what are they calling? And
Yeah.
because this whole episode, we keep seeing this general guy, Puckett, and some other military, and I'm thinking, and like, what happened after that nuclear explosion? The attack on Godzilla. Like, what happened? Do they not just know that Godzilla like swam away from that moment, or like what's the deal? Like, So are they
I
like
assume it's the Flash. Like he might have disappeared in the Flash because
no,
it
because they
stays
show
bright for
him.
a little period of time.
They show him after that
Oh,
laying on the beach. Like
maybe they just assumed he was dead and left.
yeah, that's so arrogant to just be like, "Well, we
Yeah.
got him. We got him, boys. Let's get out of here." And they just like leave. No, they like left him on the beach. So I thought that was pretty wild. But we get to see Godzilla again in such a great scene. I had to watch this scene a few times. I
Yeah.
rewound it a few times because like it was just so cool to see Godzilla just swimming around that little bay. Keiko's happy that like they didn't kill him, thank God. But it was like a weird celebration because like she's like terrified, but also
Yeah.
like thank God we didn't kill it. And Shaw's like, we didn't kill it. Oh, like
Yeah.
in his head is spinning as well, like with oh my God, we didn't kill it. That didn't work. So I thought that was pretty cool. A great scene.
Yeah, I think it's interesting just more broadly seeing how this series is interwoven Godzilla because obviously you want to be able to use him as a part of your marketing, right? But actually they've used him quite sparingly, and where he has been used, it's felt natural, which has been good.
Yeah, there's been a lot of like footage from 2014 where it's new footage, but it doesn't necessarily feel like new footage, because we're like we've
Yeah,
done this before, so it really hasn't felt like we really have Godzilla in this series to me. But this is the moment, and following this as well, I'm like, we got Godzilla
yeah,
in this series. Like
yeah.
this is great.
And
So
he's
we
looking damn good for a television series
dude,
as
it
well.
looks so good. It looks so good. And this next scene, incredible. Like so the Earth's crumbling around them. And I'm just like, uh-oh. They awoke Godzilla here. They basically all roll down this hill as the earth is just like falling apart around them. Vehicles are flying.
Yeah,
The helicopter gets hit by Godzilla's spikes down the back and stuff. And then we get just like Godzilla just chilling in the dirt, just like trying to sleep. After that fight in the last movie in 2014, Godzilla's just like, yo, I need some rest. So
yeah.
I'm gonna lay in this dirt for a little bit, I guess, which I was very confused about. I'm like, what is happening here? Was there some sort of
I so
underground
I am
tunnel, or I don't know.
Yeah, I'm really curious about this because again, in King of the Monsters, we know that Godzilla tends to stay around where Castle Bravo is under the water. So I wonder if a part of this is them luring him to where he's meant to be to hibernate.
Hmm. I have no idea. It's very hard to explain and consider what was the idea, because like he was just under a mountain, and
Yeah,
and there was a waterway, so there was like water right near them. So maybe Godzilla swam in that little river, and then I don't know. It doesn't make much sense, but
yeah,
I didn't care because it looked so awesome. you know, I at one point I thought we were gonna get the classic, monster dinosaur movie moment where like Kate walks up and like puts her hand on Godzilla's nose,
yeah.
but we did not get that. That wasn't
Then you
that did not.
remembered it's not Jurassic World.
Yeah, yeah, it was not, but it came very close because like she did say like, did you see that? He looked at
He
me like,
saw me.
yeah,
Yeah.
he saw me, and I loved it. It was a very Jurassic Park kind of
Brad,
moment
there's
with the
there's one
eyeball.
important thing that you're missing here, though, which is during this whole sequence, Scotty gets turned into a pancake by a rock.
There was a lot. They lost a lot of really good men in this moment. Monarch 2.0
Oh no!
is really, falling apart.
Yep, yep.
But I love this moment. Godzilla just looked incredible, got up, roared into the distance, and then just walked away. I was like,
Yeah.
I'm out of here. You guys
Can
aren't
we?
enough.
So touching on the other people that they lost, although I refuse to believe that he's gone, can we just touch on the fact that this moment with the helicopter is so fitting that we've been saying throughout, people don't listen to Tim, people don't believe him, and he says like 4 times, "Go up," and the pilot
Pull
doesn't
up.
do it, and then they crash. I was like, that's
Yeah.
just so fitting.
Yeah, yeah. But we got back to 1955 at this point. Shaw needs, to tell the government basically, hey, Godzilla's still alive, and your biggest weapon could not take Godzilla out. Like, so either they're going to use Godzilla in some sort of warfare scenario, or they need to create a bigger weapon, a more powerful weapon, and either one of those options is not good. So they don't really know. Like, they're kind of arguing in the hallway, but when they walk into the headquarters there, Monarch has changed command. And it was very clear that, deciding, like, I'm not going to go to this meeting, and then deciding to go to Japan instead, real bad move. And that gave us Monarch that we have today. Like, that is very clear that that's where,
Yes.
where everything went wrong. So
all I can say is, gents that are out there, think with your head and not with your word. That I won't say because Brad doesn't want to have to edit this.
That's true. I don't.
I think it's really interesting because actually this explains something in Godzilla 2014 as well, which is in Godzilla 2014. Did you ever wonder why the ground army response was led by a rear admiral in the Navy, Rear Admiral Stenz? It's interesting, isn't it, that the Navy's given command of Monarch in this series. So there's almost a connection there as well, which is really cool. And it sets that precedent for it.
Yeah.
I also think it's really interesting because we know that by the events of Kong Skull Island, Randa is having to essentially beg for an escort onto the island because he doesn't have the resources. So clearly the Navy don't take it seriously, or something else happens, and that directly leads to the downfall of Monarch, and then the segmentation of the organization that we see in the current year. Because the way that Randa presents it in Kong Skull Island is as if Monarch doesn't exist anymore, as if it's on the fringes of being shut down, whereas perhaps it does exist in this format, but it's so different to what they wanted it to be that he's almost operating as his own entity entirely. So that really does start the sort of fragmentation of the organization that you then see the ripple effects of in the modern day.
Yeah, I hope we get some of those dots connected between like what Randa's doing in Kong Skull Island and what Serizawa's doing in 2014. Like, just these kind of rogue people that seem to be doing their own thing. I'm interested to see how this all pans out and how all these people are just kind of like doing their own work, and I wonder how it all connects. So we're making like really big strides, and there's some really awesome reveals along the way. So I have faith that we'll get a lot of really cool connections still.
I've been thinking about this a lot, and especially after watching King of the Monsters, I really, depending on where this series ends, of course, because it's premature to say it until we know, I think if we end at a point where there's more story to be told, I'd really be interested in a second season that brings back characters like the Russells from King of the Monsters to see what they were doing in Monarch before they lost their son, what some of the other characters that we know have been in Monarch for a while in that film, like Brooks, were doing at this point. I think there's a lot of room to play with some really, really interesting storytelling with what they're setting up.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope we get some of those stories. That would be awesome. But we do cut back to current day, and Shaw, is walking from the desert and is like, yep, nobody survived. Nobody survived the plane crash or the helicopter crash. It was just such like a little throwaway line. And I literally wrote, Tim's dead? Like, what?
Yeah.
No way. Like, there's no way. I don't know how.
No.
I refuse to believe it.
He fell on Godzilla's spine and then slid down it like a slide and survived.
Yeah, that would be amazing to see. He's like, he just got on the back, and it's going to turn into, how Indiana Jones took a submarine all the way across the ocean to like, some island.
I thought you were going to say like, Tim finds a random fridge on Godzilla's back.
No, but like everybody's like, how did the submarine go down? Because it looked like it was going under the water. How did Indiana Jones hang on to the side of a submarine? The whole journey. Like, this is impossible. He didn't go under and just like hold his breath. So I imagine Tim's like just clinging on to the back of Godzilla, like, where are we going, buddy? Where are we going? He ends up in like Japan or something. He's like, ah.
He's Verdugo on the phone in the other hand, like, I'm here, I'm with him. I found him. I told you I was right.
I just want to know. I want a scene where, like, they meet him in another city, and he's like, they're like, "How did you get here? We thought you died, Eh, Godzilla," and they all look at him like, "What?" Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
want to talk about it. Like one of those kind of
Or,
moments. Like,
right. Hear me out, Brad. Hear me out. You've seen Agents of Shield, right? Tim is the Patton Oswalt of the Monarch universe. Oh, that was my
yeah,
identical brother, Tim. I'm Jim.
I'm Jim. Yeah, that would be a whole different scenario, I guess. But we do get to learn in this moment that Shaw is trying to help him, not stop
Yes.
him. So he's trying to help Godzilla, which I love. I thought that was really cool because you've got this military guy who's got this, you know, basically this history of just like punching and beating and destroying things, and now he's like, well, I'm gonna try. I want to try to save Godzilla.
Yeah.
I don't want to destroy him. Like that's not what we need to be doing here. And they think basically, oh, he's insane. Like we are done following you at this point. We just heard enough. The kids are out. We're gonna go find our dad. And which I can't believe that he just is like Hiroshi's just like, yo, peace out. I saw y'all,
Yeah.
but I am gone, dude. I'm not even. Maybe he
This
doesn't
guy is
know who it
really like a
was.
case study in bad fatherhood.
Yeah, like I have a really hard time like having sympathy for this character.
Can we just imagine that he stood there? He like looks up. He's like, "Oh, my two secret families have met each other now." Anyway,
See ya. Just takes off and just gets out of there, dude. Like I don't know what's up with him, but
off to see his
it's
third
disappointing.
family.
Yeah. So Shaw takes
I
the vehicle, and then the kids start walking, and they're out of there. But one little reveal here at the end, May reveals that she sold them out. And
Yes.
she had a lot of bad people to deal with in the past, and she got kind of a new start in Japan. And we maybe talked a little bit about like this kind of exact thing
Yeah.
before, but basically she used that info as leverage. All the information that she had to say like, I want to get back to my old life, and be done with this fake one that I've been living for a little while. So, and everybody's kind of fed up with her. So that's the end. That's
Yep.
the end of the episode.
What was I going to say to you? I find it really interesting that the way Shaw's framed in this episode, with how he says about looking after Godzilla, is that he is almost framed very similar to Alan Jonah in King of the Monsters. When that character's motivations are presented, he seems kind of a bit crazy. This is Charles Dance's character.
Mhm.
It's just very similar to how he phrases what they're doing in that with his whole "Long live the king." So I found that quite
Mm.
interesting, the
Hmm.
sort of parallel there. But also episode 7, the title cracks me up because it's called "Will the Real May Please Stand Up?" And it says May finally faces her past. Duvall and Shaw follow traces of Godzilla and Hiroshi. So I think we're finally, obviously we are going to see what's been happening with May, and it's really interesting because it was bad enough that she couldn't go home and go to her family. So that's quite curious.
Yeah, but at the same time, she's also like, I got money. We can just use my money that I've been not using because I didn't want to be found. Like, we can just
Yeah.
use that money. I got lots of money. So I don't know what the resolution was supposed to be, or like, how she was going to be able to go back to her life.
I
Because if
don't
I
think
don't
she
know.
was at that point. I think she was just desperate to keep them as friends.
Yeah, I don't know. I have no idea. But I can't wait to learn more and figure out where Godzilla's off to,
Yeah.
and how they're gonna get out of this desert. I mean, there was like a little town over the ridge that they
Yeah.
quickly showed, so I guess they resolved that. They do have a nice way of like not leaving you hanging on some aspects of the show and making it believable enough. So they've been
Yeah.
wandering through like a lot of like wild places
They
for a
have.
while. So
Dude, think
uh
about their step count. Their Fitbits are going to
I
be
know, right?
so happy.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to the next one, episode 7. Did we have a title? What was the title of this one? Did you write that one down?
So the title of this one, Brad, I'm so prepared. I've got the Apple screen up on my phone.
Good.
Um,
Well, good thing we're
the
saying the title at
title of
the end of
this
the
one
episode too.
is Terrifying Miracles.
Okay. Oh, I love that title.
Yeah.
Great title. I'm glad I didn't see that ahead of time because I really love that reveal, like, within the episode. Sometimes it's
Yeah.
nice to like not look into things too deeply until you see it. But
And
great
then next
episode.
week, will the real May stand up?
Yep, we'll find out next time on Monarch Legacy of Monsters. So Tom, uh, where can people find you? You anywhere on the internet? What's
Yeah.
going on?
Right now, I am adventuring in the TARDIS, so try not to find me. I'll pop into unit headquarters occasionally, but apart from that, yeah.
Okay. That's very non-specific, but
Yeah.
I'm out here in my own TARDIS, I guess. Um, but you can find me on Threads, and the podcast is on Threads, the Jurassic Park podcast. Been doing a lot of fun stuff over there. That's feels like a very growing network currently. I know it just got opened up a few days ago to the EU, and it feels like dramatically like it's really becoming what like Twitter used to be for me. So the podcast is like no longer on Twitter. I kind of made it official the other day, and I just deleted it off my phone and said, "Hey, we're not going to be there anymore." So we are not there, but we are on
I
Threads
instantly
and
made an account called Jurassic
Instagram.
Park Pod.
Well, the account's still there, so don't. I'm gonna let it sit there until Elon decides to kick us off, I guess, or make us pay or something. But the account's sitting there. I'm parking it. All right, so that's what's happening. But you can find us on any of your podcasting platforms out there. You can't find these episodes; these do not exist on the podcast. But if you want to hear us
No.
talk about Jurassic Park, please do so. And we do have a holiday episode coming up next week. We had Camp Cretaceous, or whatever that show is called, Chaos Theory discussion the other day. We had a discussion about Jurassic Park Survival, the new video game that's going to be coming up in the future. A lot of fun stuff on the show. So please go check it out. But that's about all I have for you today. So thank you so much, everybody, for watching this and listening and enjoying the show with us. Had a good time. Look, he's doing something to us. Can't really, I don't know. But we'll catch you later, everybody. Bye. Have a good one.